welcome to Stillspeakpod. I apologize. I have been missing for a few days. I did a video on Harmony Montgomery, and then I don't know what happened, but my laptop that's about, 18 months old, just kicked the bucket. It's not going on. It's nothing. It's not charging, nothing. So I don't know what the hell happened, but definitely a bummer, right? Especially right after Christmas. I do have other devices in my home, but they are dedicated to my children's schoolwork. And I do have desktops, but they're the kinds that are the all-in-one where everything is in the screen. And I don't want to move them every night out into the garage, right? Because that's just a project. So I didn't do that. I'm currently using one of my son's laptops, and I'm going to use this until I can get a new one, which will hopefully be soon, so that I'm not, using his device for this. But anyway, moving on. So about 10 days to 2 weeks ago, we started this series about 3 little girls. And we started with Lina, who is missing from San Antonio, Texas. And then we spoke about Harmony Montgomery. And that is out of New Hampshire. And then tonight we're going to talk about Oakley Carlson. And this will wrap up this series that I wanted to cover about these 3 little girls and their stories. First, I want to talk about Lina, and as far as any updates are concerned, there really isn't any. Since I made the video, the FBI has taken the case on, so that's wonderful. In addition to that, we did see a little bit of activity last week. There was a tip that came in that led police to a body of water about 2 miles from where Lina was last seen, and nothing was found. It's one of those, moments where you go, well, it's good that she wasn't found in that water, right? Because that would have confirmed that she's deceased. At the same time, you see these searches and you get this sort of hope that there's going to be something found that's going to bring some type of conclusion to the story. And I definitely didn't want her to be found in this body of water, right? At the same time, it's like, okay, well, we know she's not in that body of water. Where the hell is she? And I've been sitting back in groups, and I really haven't said much. But it's reminding me so much of this story that happened to a little girl named Fayes. And I actually spoke about her in my Summer Wells series very briefly when I was discussing her mother. And I had to actually look up when she disappeared because it feels like a really long time ago. But when I pulled it up on Google, I was actually really shocked because to me, the last 2 years with the pandemic has flown by. And when I saw the date, it was February of 2020, I was kind of shocked by that because it feels like it's been really long since I followed her story. And that was out of South Carolina. I believe she was 6. And there's a reason I'm bringing it up. A lot of people are, saying, the parents must be involved because, this is an apartment complex and somebody would see something and it was the middle of the day and da-da-da-da-da. And I know that those statements are just random thoughts that people have, but you can just look at so many other cases and automatically say, well, just because it's an apartment complex doesn't mean anything. Children are kidnapped from their beds with their parents in the next room. I mean, if a criminal, a predator, wants a child, they'll go through any obstacle to do that, okay? And the reason why I'm thinking of Fayes, though, specifically, because Fayes' mother got her off the bus And Faye, being a little girl, 6 years old, wanted to play outside in the front of the home. And X amount of time went by. She went outside and Faye was gone. Okay? And Mom was really quiet. She didn't speak out. She didn't, come on in front of a mic and blubber and scream and cry or anything like that. But her 911 call was really upsetting. You can tell in the 911 call, she was panicked. You can just feel it. And if you're a parent, you just felt her fear. She knew in her gut this was not going to end well. And you can definitely hear that. And Faye lived in what I would describe as a townhome community. It was 2 townhomes attached to each other, but there was a whole bunch of those, so pairs, okay? And they were all close to one another. This wasn't like spread out. It wasn't, a single family home in the middle of nowhere. They were all right on top of one another. And so it was very similar to an apartment complex, but just with townhomes. And it was the middle of the day. She went missing, within an hour or 2 of getting off the school bus. So what ended up happening with Faye, and it was such a tragic story, oh my goodness, it was so tragic, was that a neighbor snatched her in the middle of the day in this busy neighborhood. And, had other houses around this community and, nobody saw anything apparently. And when the police were looking for her, they started to go door to door. So now what police normally do with children is they immediately want to talk to the very close neighbors, right? The people, right there. And then they spread out. But what they definitely tried to do as well is that they look up the registered sex offenders in the area, and they always go and pay them a visit, check on them, question them, etc. And so police were out doing their, surveillance and search and knocking on neighbors' doors. And at one point, they actually did knock on the door that we find out later was Faye's kidnapper and killer. And apparently, Faye was inside at the time. And if the police had actually entered the home, they may have found her alive. Sadly, due to how big the story got so quickly, and due to that pressure and the walls caving in on this man, he ended up killing her and dumping her in a field not far away where police had already searched for her. So they know that he had put her out there after the fact. It was really sad, right? And we often see people say, why don't they go door to door and just search everybody's home? Well, you can't do that. You can't just go walking up into people's homes and searching it. We have rights, you need probable cause, etc. I get it. Because with Faye's disappearance, they went to his door. They spoke with him, and she was inside, most likely alive. How sad is that? Is it their fault? No, it's not, right? It's not. There's nothing that they could have done. They needed reason to enter his home, and they had no way of knowing she was inside. So it was a really tragic story. And so I think of this story when I see people going, it's an apartment complex and there's so many people and people coming and going, and how did anybody see anything? Well, Faye's neighborhood was very similar and nobody seemed to see anything. She just got snatched, boom, gone in a flash. Nobody saw anything, okay? And in my opinion, and maybe as time goes on, it will change, okay? At this moment, I actually do believe that Lina was taken. I do. And I think that it's possible she was taken by somebody in the apartment complex. Because think about it. Think about how easy it is to snatch a child that's alone in an apartment community. Really, all you have to do is open the door, grab them, bring them inside, and that's it. That's it. Do what you gotta do. Small enough child, you leave later in the day with a bag or a garbage bag and you dump the body. I know, that sounds terrible. But, I mean, think about how easy it is. She couldn't have been walking past somebody's apartment. They swung the door open because they saw her alone. They said, oh, look, I have a doggy. Boom, in the door. Done. It's terrible. But at this point, there have been a ton of searches for this girl. There are a ton of investigators on the case, organizations, volunteers. They have searched and searched and searched for her for 3 weeks to no avail. And there was the story of Christopher Ramirez that I told you about on this channel not long ago, who was also 3 years old. And he actually made it 5 miles from his home and was found alive 3 days later. 5 miles is a lot for a 3-year-old to make it, right? And he was safe, and he was okay, and he was reunited with his mother. This little boy lasted 3 days outside. It was amazing. It was absolutely beyond shocking that he was found. But with Lina, they have been searching up to 5 miles away in a radius, okay? And they were searching from day one, and they had the volunteers and the resources and the organizations off the bat. And they searched, and they searched. She's been all over the news. And it's now been 3 weeks. Over 3 weeks, and there's no sign of her. So the idea that she could have wandered off and something happened to her, I'm just not believing that's what happened. I don't. I think at this point, they would have located her body. I'm going to be hopeful that some type of miracle happens and we get some information soon and they hopefully find her. Now, I want to talk about Harmony Montgomery a little bit more. I did a 2-part series on her, and it didn't get very many views, which I'm kind of shocked because the story is relatively popular right now. I'm not quite sure what that's about, but again, I don't fall in the Facebook algorithm yet. So in order for people to see my videos, they need to see it on my social media post or off of my hashtags on Twitter. So I would appreciate if you would actually share those, because I think those videos are really important because I've discussed a lot of really important topics like neglect and abuse and substance abuse and DCYF and the history of child welfare services and things like that. And it's topics that we need to talk more about and be more proactive in helping to change laws related to these types of agencies and services. So let's talk about Harmony's story a little bit more, because there's been a little bit more information that has come out, and I want to share that. Well, in one of my videos about her, I said that the mom, the one that lost custody of her, had not spoken to the media yet. And it was a little strange to me because she's all out there posting on social media about, being outraged and DCF failed her child, and we talked about all this. But it seemed to me that every article mentioned that they had reached out to her for an interview or a comment, and she kept declining it. Now, I do understand that some parents don't want to talk to the media, and I don't blame them. But her very blunt statements that she was making via social media told me that if this woman is serious and she really doesn't know anything, and if she's really concerned, then why isn't she talking to the media? It made me wonder. I definitely didn't judge her, because I'm the number one person to say, hey, some parents do interviews and some don't. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, so I don't blame them. It was just her being so vocal on social media, and I couldn't make sense of why she wouldn't take it to the regular media. Well, she did, finally, weeks after the fact, but she did. A man named Brian Enten, and some of you may be familiar with him. He's with News Nation. He covered the Gabby Petito case extensively, and he basically lived outside Brian Laundrie's home for about 7 weeks and was reporting on that case, and he has now moved on to other cases. He also covered Latasha Norris's case, which we discussed on this channel. He briefly did Summer Wells' case, which we also did on this channel, and many others since Gabby Petito's case. Well, his station sent him out to New Hampshire to cover Harmony's story, because it's now a popular story, and of course everybody's going to want to jump on it. And I was really glad to see that Brian was going out there, because I hate the media. I really do. But Brian specifically, not his station, but him himself as a journalist and reporter, he is very, matter of fact. He's very a stickler to sticking to the facts, and he doesn't, speculate. He doesn't throw his opinion in there. He doesn't come across bias. He works really hard to get information. He's great. He's what, in my experience as a kid, a journalist should be. Because when I was a kid, that's how they were. And then something happened along the way. I'm not quite sure what that happened. And I haven't seen a real journalist in quite some time. Okay? And that goes for all mainstream media. Not one side or the other. All of them. So Brian's kind of like a breath of fresh air. He really is. Because you never know what he's thinking. He just never really has this biased tone. Even when he's just telling the facts, you can't tell what his personal opinion is, which I think is amazing. Now, I sit here and tell you my personal opinion, right? Because I'm a YouTube channel. But if I was, some big journalist, I would strive to be like Brian Enten, where I would just be solely reporting the facts and not letting my opinion, my emotions, or anything to overtake me. So anyway, make a long story short, he flies out to New Hampshire to cover Harmony's story, and he's the one to land the interview with Harmony's biological mother, Crystal. Now, actually, I think one reporter actually got an interview with her the day prior, because there was a vigil that was held, but I'm not totally certain on that. Regardless, he got the more thorough and longer interview with her. And I don't know. I didn't get a good vibe from her, and I still am not sure that I believe her claims of trying everything to find her daughter. And I don't know. I didn't get the greatest of vibes from her. I really didn't. Something felt off. I don't know what that off is. I can't explain it to you. Something just didn't feel right. And, it's hard to interview. And so I really try not to go off of the interviews, because I have been in that position before of involving a different topic where you're being interviewed, and oh my God, I was nothing like myself. It's so nerve-wracking. And so she could have just been nervous and I mean, I don't have a baseline. I don't know her. I don't know what she normally acts like to compare it to. You know what I'm saying? So even though I felt off, I'm not like, oh my God, she did something. Or, oh my God, she's definitely lying. You know, I don't know. I just didn't have a good feeling about it. There was just something about it. And if you want to listen to that, you can actually look it up on News Nation's YouTube channel. And it is on there. And it is also on Brian Enten, Entin, his Twitter account. He is a Twitter fiend. He is constantly tweeting, so you have to kind of scroll through his feed and you will find it. So a few days ago, at the beginning of the week, police actually went back to the home that Harmony lived at with Kayla and Adam and their 3 children. And they actually thawed out the frozen ground in the backyard with hot water piping. And then they set up tents and they began to dig. Based upon tips or a hunch or a feeling, they thought that it was possible she could be in that backyard. After many hours of searching, they came up with nothing. Harmony's biological mother, Crystal, said that she feels that Adam sold her. Now, that's her theory. That's her gut feeling. She knows him. She knows her daughter. So maybe she's onto something. I know a lot of people have been really thinking the same and thinking that, you know, he possibly sold her for money or for drugs. And it's definitely something that's on the table and something to consider. And she also said that she has a gut feeling as her mother that she's still alive. And this kind of struck me. A mother's instinct is insane. Let me tell you, your gut feeling is usually always right. I'm just saying, okay? And in these cases where somebody's missing and then they end up deceased, you often hear the mother of that person say, I know in my gut they're no longer with us. They just know. Gabby Petito's mom said, she just knew. She knew. It was just this automatic gut instinct that just told her she's not okay. But you usually fight against it, right? Because you don't want to think that, but you can't help it. And your gut's telling you that's what it is. You got to remain hopeful. And you're trying to just like, okay, block that out. And try to stay hopeful, right? That's what usually happens. So it was interesting to me that she says that based on her mother's instinct, that Harmony's still alive. It really kind of struck me. But then I thought about this further. Now, she did not really have Harmony most of her life. She was in and out of foster care, okay? And you can't really build up much of a connection or a bond when you're constantly being ripped apart from one another. And then, Adam got custody of her. And so I thought about it and I was like, I do strongly believe in a mother's instinct. And she may be right, regardless of her history with Harmony and their relationship. Maybe her gut instinct's right. Or maybe because she didn't really have a deep connection with her child, maybe her gut's wrong. Maybe she don't know. Or maybe she does know. Maybe she's involved. And that's why she's so sure that she could be alive. We just have to wait and see. But it's something that stuck out to me because it's not very often that you will hear them say, my instinct tells me she's alive. It's just not typical, okay? I'm sure there are people out there who have said it, but it's definitely rare based upon the cases I have followed. So, then she released a statement through Brian Enten. And based upon the posts that I've seen from her, it looks to me like somebody wrote this for her, because there's good punctuation and grammar, and there's complete sentences. It's very unlike her social media post. I do believe this text came from her, but I do believe that somebody wrote it for her. I don't know if she's hired a lawyer or maybe it was a family member or friend, but it doesn't match her social media post. And let's just read it, and then I'm going to make a comment. It says, as a mother who has confronted addiction, I realize I too have failed Harmony in the past. But the safety nets in place that were supposed to protect Harmony during my battle, including DCYF and law enforcement, failed my little girl. Battling addiction is common in this country. Recovery is less common, but I took the necessary steps to do that. Once I did recover, I kicked and screamed against the legal challenges to find out where Harmony was and if she was safe. Both DCYF and the police failed to answer me during those periods. Today, they wish to minimize that. I have been honest about my past. Are they? Ooh. Alrighty there, lady. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning there. As a mother who has confronted addiction, I realized I too have failed Harmony in the past. I'm glad she said that. And I'm glad she recognized that. Yes, you absolutely failed your daughter. 100%. I said it in my other videos. You can sit here and blame DCYF all you like. You can blame law enforcement all you like. But it began with you. You're the one who failed your daughter. She should have never been in DCYF care to begin with. So, good. I'm glad that you recognize that. But then you minimize that statement because then you went on to say, but the safety nets in place that were supposed to protect Harmony during my battle, including DCYF and law enforcement, failed my little girl. And it's funny she says that because I said in my 2-part series about Harmony that I think parents who are abusive or neglectful or have addiction problems rely too heavily on the system and they use it as a safety net because they know, well, I can do whatever I want to my kid because, well, if DCYF takes them, then, right? It's a safety net. If you don't want to be a parent, they'll just take your kid and give him to somebody who does. That's the problem to me. That's a huge problem to me. How about just being a responsible parent? How about that? I don't know. Okay, and then she goes on, battling addiction, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then she says, I kicked and screamed against illegal challenges to find out where Harmony was and if she was safe. Well, this goes back to she had absolutely no legal rights to that child. Law enforcement all the time deals with these domestic situations in custody where one parent no longer has custody and they are trying everything to interfere with the person who does have custody, and a lot of times they're false accusations, okay? And so they're no stranger to this. So you have this woman who claims that she was calling them off the hook. I don't personally believe that. And they look into it, and she has no legal right to this child. So it's possible that they're looking at it as, well, there's nothing she can do because she signed her rights over after losing the children to the state. And she has no right to even know where that child is, let alone see them or speak to them. I don't know if anybody explained that to her, when the process occurred, but that's the reality. And we can hate on Adam all we want, but he never had to allow Harmony to speak or see his mother. He did not have to legally tell her where she was, how she was, where they were living, or nothing. Nothing at all. He was in his full legal rights to not do that. So, we go to, I was kicking and screaming. Well, not really. She had a post like right before the news conference announcing her being missing. You didn't go kicking and screaming to the media. You didn't kick and scream all over your social media posts prior to that. I mean, not really. So I don't know why you're saying that. You weren't making petitions. You weren't rallying people. You weren't protesting. Like I said, you weren't reaching out to the media. You didn't seem to write to your local legislator. You went to the mayor after a certain amount of calls allegedly to DCYF, but it wasn't until recently. So, I mean, I'm going to have to beg to differ that you didn't make a stink. You didn't run around kicking and screaming for somebody to help you to make sure that your kid is okay. That didn't really seem to happen. But I digress. And then she ends by saying that they failed her. And today they wish to minimize that. I don't know really why she said that. And it may be something that's happening behind the scenes that they maybe said to her, or people being interviewed that are connected to her, because then she says, I've been honest about my past, are they? So now she's calling out DCYF and the police and basically saying they're liars, is what she's saying, okay? Which, there is now an extensive investigation occurring, okay? Tremendous amounts of resources are being used to find out and locate Harmony one way or another. These people are the people who will hopefully eventually make some progress and be able to solve the case. And this is the time that you choose to call them out. They're the ones looking for your child. They're the ones spending countless hours and resources. And this is the time right now to spark a war with the police department and DCYF. No. It's not the time. It's not the time for that. If you're really concerned about your daughter, if you really want her found, now's not the time to pick a fight with them. Period. Sorry. Now is the time that you cooperate, you give as much information as possible, you ask if you can help with search efforts, you talk to everybody you know into speaking with the police if they have information. You go out and you're putting up missing persons flyers, you're speaking to the media, etc. Now is not the time for an argument or to call out these agencies. And it's really funny because the police chief actually said something similar. He said, now's not the time for me to call out DCYF. And he's right. It's not the time. It's not the time for that. And between this and her post about, once she's done with DCYF, she's going to own them, these two things being combined is telling me that this is leading in to a lawsuit where she is going to be trying to get money from these agencies. 100%. And the biggest question that I have here is when that comes, because I'm almost certain it's going to, in my opinion, are you also going to do something to change the system? And not only are you going to do something to proactively change the system so it doesn't happen to another child, but are you going to become an advocate who will go out and try to help other people with substance issues, okay, to be better parents so they don't also lose their child to DCYF? Or are you just looking to get some money? That's my question. What's your motive here? Because a lot of parents will start foundations or organizations. They become advocates, etc. Because they want to make change. Because they don't want somebody else to go through what they went through. And monetary gain comes second to that. Some of them do take lawsuits or civil suits against people or agencies. What's her goal? Are you going to do both? Or are you just going to try to get a payday? Payday from the people who took in your child because you could not be a parent to them to begin with. Listen, I'm really trying not to drag this woman too much. It's hard, though. It is. I'm just going to be totally honest with you. It's really hard. It's really, really hard not to. And I spoke of all the reasons why it's hard for me to do that in my other videos. So I'm not even going to sit here and repeat it because we're almost at 40 minutes and I haven't even gotten to Oakley yet. And I know I should be more angry with Adam. Here's the thing. I am angry with Adam and his wife, or the wife that he separated from, Kayla. Very much so. The thing is they're in jail. And we're not hearing from them to talk about, right? We can only go off of what's in court records. Crystal is now speaking with the media. She's releasing statements, right? And her boyfriend has spoken out in groups. And he's a very sketchy character himself. And so there's more to talk about. And the more I see her blaming DCYF, the more angry I get. And I do believe that they did have massive ball drops during this case. I do. They absolutely did. And there needs to be something that needs to change. Abso-freaking-lutely. But all it sounds like to me, personally, is deflection. It's just deflection. I know she sits here and she says, oh, I realize I failed Harmony too. I don't know if she really does realize that. Because again, she goes on to say, but the safety nets that were in place failed my daughter. What do they say about buts? Right? When you're apologizing to somebody, you say, well, I apologize, but it's very similar to this statement. But, so, two more things about Harmony, and then we're going to move on to Oakley, and then I'll only have about, 45 minutes or so to cover Oakley, and that story is just as heartbreaking. There was pictures that were released involving a visit to the home that Harmony shared with Kayla, Adam, and her 3 siblings. So a neighbor called in a service request claiming that, parents were living at this address, that they had no electricity, only a small generator, and that there was trash everywhere, and she was concerned for the child and asked for the condition of the home to be checked. And they went there, and they noted that everybody was home. that the generator was running, that there was food in the home, that all the kids appeared healthy, all was well, and that they were still working with a man named Demetrius from DCYF, and the date is 8/5 of 2019, which is just a few months before they claim that she went back to her mother, or that Adam brought her to her mother. Well, he says that Crystal came and got Harmony, and his wife says that he said he was taking Harmony to Crystal. So it depends on who the hell you believe. And in these pictures, now, there's a very divided reaction to the pictures, okay? I've seen worse. I've seen a lot worse involving these cases. And honestly, I was more surprised that it wasn't in worse condition. I was expecting worse, for sure. Now, is the house ideal? No, not at all. Do I live like that? Hell freaking no. There was food in the fridge. Yes, there's, a bunch of clutter and junk laying around. Nothing that I could see off the bat that seemed dangerous for a young child. There seemed to be a lot of toys, decorations, baby equipment, because remember, Kayla had a small child at the time, 2 small children. And I actually need to correct myself, because I said that Harmony lived there with Kayla, Adam, and her 3 siblings, but that's actually not true. It was Harmony and 2 siblings with Adam and Kayla, because it was after Harmony went quote-unquote missing that Kayla had a 3rd child. But keep this in mind now. If you're going back to this time frame, they had Harmony, who was 5. They would have had another child who was roughly about 2 at the time, and then a newborn. So that's 3 small children. I have 3 small children, and they're 2 years apart, and then 4 years in between my last 2. And listen, okay, listen here. When you have multiple small children, keeping a clean freaking house is next to impossible. Now, if you're one of those, clean freak, neat freak type of people, and you constantly are following after the child when they're doing something, then yeah, you can keep your house clean. But when you're doing that, you can't get anything else done, because all you're doing is going behind the child and picking up after them and cleaning and mopping and sweeping. And some people, will let the kids do whatever all day long within reason. And then they wait till the kids are in bed and they can actually be productive. And then they clean the entire house before they go to bed, only for the family to wake up the next day and make a freaking mess again. Okay? We're all different. Do I live like her? Like I said, no, absolutely not. But in the context that she had 3 small children in that home, probably not sleeping much because she had a smaller child, I don't think it's the most horrific thing that I've ever seen. I don't. I really don't. Again, ideal? No. But what was her living circumstances when she was in Crystal's care? We don't know. Could have been horrible for all we know. No idea. I don't think that DCF in Massachusetts took Harmony solely because of Crystal's substance abuse. As a matter of fact, it was said that it was in part due to her substance abuse. We actually don't know the other reasons. And I'm sure they weren't good reasons. Okay? And there are children out there who live in far worse. I've seen it in these cases. Horrific. Absolutely horrific. So, in comparison to those, I would say the house was, to be expected. To be expected. You're talking about people with major issues, with 3 small children, who probably didn't have a whole lot of money. And, again, it could be worse. So, all of this being said, There was an investigation, and it was found that there were actually 30 calls that were made in the short amount of time that they lived at this home on Guilford Street. And they did have a DCF caseworker because of that. And it included neighbors calling, like we just discussed, about the children, the conditions of the home, abuse towards dogs, nasty living conditions and utilities being shut off for months, etc. So this does prove that DCYF was involved in their lives, but for some reason, every time they went there, they, I guess, didn't feel like it was anything that was detrimental, that they didn't find anything was founded. I mean, just because somebody calls something in doesn't make it fact, right? And anybody can call in and make an accusation. As a matter of fact, people do it all the time, and it's a lie. And then DCF or CPS or DCYF goes and they investigate, and they have to find out, are these claims and accusations true? And when they get there, if the children have beds, if the children have food, if of course there's not like feces laying around, there's not like a dog kennel that they're sleeping in, they have clothes, etc., they might find that the accusations or claims are not true. And so you can look at this and say, oh my God, 30 calls and oh my God, they did nothing about it. Well, they were going there, so it's not that they didn't do anything about it. It's just that when they got there, they either found that the claims were untrue or the condition wasn't bad enough to do anything about it. We don't know, right? And this is why they're doing an investigation into it. I may need to make a separate video for Oakley at the rate I'm going, because I forgot about some of the things I wanted to talk about with Harmony. So some of the claims do appear to be from neighbors. One caller says that she was concerned that a dog was being abused. When asked about the abuse, she said she heard people inside yelling at the dog, and then the dog yelping, and then more yelling. Again, she didn't physically see anything. She heard something. And maybe this neighbor was upset with the conditions of the outside of the home or them being loud, and so she was calling it into DCF, and maybe the claims were just not totally true. That's possible. Again, people make false accusations. Another one says that, this is another neighbor, and that at 3 a.m., his wife heard music and a lot of talking. This morning, been no movement from the house, and the car appears to have been broken into. Said there are prime marks all over the car. We've dealt with this address quite a bit in the last couple of months. So this is another neighbor who looks to be like almost implying that somebody that was at their home maybe broke into their car. And then there are some calls from Kevin Montgomery. Now, we talked about Kevin. That is Adam's uncle. And he's the one that claimed that Adam admitted to him that he gave Harmony a black eye. And he said that he also had called DCF in New Hampshire many times, but that he never heard back from them, and he assumed that it had been looked into. And so this actually does prove that he did do that. Here's what's really interesting to me, though, okay? So there's these, 29, I believe, or 30 calls made with accusations, many of them involving neighbors, several of them having to do with Kevin. But I'm not seeing any service calls that were made by, guess who? Crystal, like she claims. So, what's interesting to me about that is that you're going to tell me that the agency was looking into all of these calls from neighbors and Kevin, but that they ignored yours? They didn't document yours? They didn't look into it when you called? I find that hard to believe. From the pictures that I saw, okay, I could understand why, when they went there, they possibly were like, all right, well, it's not the greatest, but they do have food, they do have shelter, they do have clothes, they do have beds, etc. And they just kind of like, that was it, right? And they ended it. But it does appear that they were reporting to the home every time these calls were made, because they did have a caseworker. And it's noted on one of the reports that, quote, we've dealt with this address quite a bit in the last couple of months. That was September 18, 2019. So, yeah, they were showing up at least. You might not agree with them not doing anything about all these calls, but again, you have to take into consideration what the bar is for them. I mean, what's their criteria? Were the claims made falsely? Were people just upset with them for other reasons and calling in accusations that were unfounded? I mean, we don't know. So you can't look at this and be like, oh, 30 calls and they failed them. We don't know that. I can tell you right freaking now. Let me tell you, okay? If you're not familiar with YouTube drama, be grateful. Because let me tell you something. They call CPS on each other on YouTube like freaking crazy. They're calling CPS on people on the internet where they never saw their home, they never met them in person, they know nothing about their children, but they got into a fight with them. And because they don't agree with something they may have said or their viewpoint, right, they call CPS on them, okay? And obviously, those accusations don't make it fact. It's just accusations. And then CPS, DCF, DCYF goes and they investigate and they see whether or not the claims are true or not. And it all starts from an argument that two creators or a creator and a subscriber had, and one got angry at the other and they made a phone call, okay? So if that's happening on YouTube, and it's definitely happening on social media, okay? And then you definitely see neighbors who get annoyed with other neighbors and just want that neighbor gone, so they do it too. Maybe you wouldn't, and I certainly wouldn't ever. But there are people who do this. So if it's happening in all these different places, like YouTube, social media, neighbors, etc., who's to say it's not happening everywhere? And they're not getting endless calls of crazy accusations that when they go there, they end up not being true. That being said, obviously something was going on, okay? Something was not right, because shortly later, she disappears, right? And I thought about this. And I had to wonder for a second here if there was a growing concern because CPS was, or not CPS, I call it CPS because we're on that, it's called CPS, but if they were getting concerned that so many calls had been made to DCYF, if that is why something happened to Harmony. What do I mean by that? Did they have a concern that these calls were going to raise red flags to their custody agreement with DCF in Massachusetts? And was it going to be detrimental to possibly losing their two children together? Or a concern, was it a threat that to keep harmony around would result in them also losing their two children together? So now when somebody calls DCYF, okay, and then they come there and they have this caseworker, they're aware that people are calling. And so they end up moving not long after Harmony goes quote unquote missing. And it appears that from when she went quote unquote missing to when they moved, that the calls kind of started to, stop. And maybe it's a possibility here that they ended up leaving because they were concerned that another neighbor would make a call, and when they came there, guess what? Harmony would no longer be there, and they would have to come up with some reason on where the hell she was or what the hell happened to her, right? So, and at one point after they left this home, they were living out of a car before moving into an apartment. So obviously when you're living in a car, you're not as easy to find than when you have an actual physical address to locate you. But all these calls into the agency, right? And then where was all the callers for the last 2 years? Where are they? Where's Crystal's calls that she claimed she made? How come there's this documentation of neighbors and Kevin calling, but no documentation she did? They just stopped showing up. They had an open case and a caseworker, and all the calls just stopped and they stopped checking on them? I don't know. We have to wait and see. I know, I'm all over the place, right? 1 minute I'm like going against DCYF, and then other times I'm not, and I'm like, all right, well, Kayla and Adam are shit people, and they definitely did something to this little girl, but at the same time, it sounds like I'm defending them because I'm saying their home isn't really the most horrible thing I've ever seen. Well, there's a reason for that, because I'm not emotionally attached to the story. I'm able to look at the information and see both sides of it. Okay? And I'm able to process all of that and say, okay, well, 30 calls into DCF does look bad. But were those accusations true? Or did somebody lie about them? But then I can say, at the same time, well, Harmony goes missing and nobody seems to know where she is, or they're not saying where she is. So obviously something was very wrong that DCYF missed through all these calls. And I can do that and be reasonable and rational to explore all the different possibilities and both sides of it. Her reward fund is up to $100,000. And there's a reason I'm mentioning that, because there's been a ton of business people who have been donating to the fund that had been started for her. And that's a lot of money, and there's still nobody coming forth to get that money. Police have even said that if Kayla and Adam start talking, that they would get, be allowed to get that money. And people were outraged by this. But think about this. If they come out and they say, well, she died in our care and we buried her XYZ, okay? So it's a confession, which means they're going to be charged with murder, okay? And that means that they're not going anywhere. So really, they don't need the $100,000. What the hell are they going to do with it? Nothing, because they're going to be sitting in jail. So that money would actually go to, their children. And I wouldn't be against that. because it's not the kid's fault. And if Harmony lived a shitty life, those 2 kids, or now 3 kids, probably did too. And so I would be totally okay with the reward money going to those children because it's not their fault. Their parents are pieces of shit. So even with this $100,000 reward, they're still not speaking. They're not coming forth and saying, yep, I'm ready to confess. I'll tell you where she's at. They haven't done it. Haven't. But this bothered me, okay, because $100,000, okay? And I was preparing tonight for this video, and I was going around collecting, articles that I've been saving over the last few days to kind of get my thoughts together and whatnot. And I came across an article that says that Kevin Montgomery, which is Adam's uncle, started a GoFundMe account for a reward. What? With a $25,000 goal. Quote, my 7-year-old niece, Harmony Montgomery, is missing. My whole family is hurting over this. We're asking for the public's help to offer someone reward money if they know the whereabouts of Harmony. So I'm asking, please, and thank you. Not technically his niece because he's Adam's uncle, but whatever. Doesn't matter. I don't understand this other than to think that a not nice thing, which is that they're looking to make some money off this because there's $100,000 reward, and you started this after they started the reward fund, and at the time that he started it, it was at $94,000, and anybody can call the police and stay anonymous and still get that money. Okay, if it leads to finding Harmony. So why the hell would anybody call you over calling the police when the police are going to give you them way more money? Okay, and what also bugs me is that it seems to be for a reward instead of, like, let's say, a private investigator, which a lot of families do. Sorry about that. I had a knock at the door. So yeah, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me, right? Because there is a reward fund. So why wouldn't you start a fund to get a private investigator on top of all the resources that police are using to help locate her? If you guys are seriously concerned and you really want to find her one way or another, then use that to get a private investigator, but that's not what it was set up for. Now, as of 4 or 5 days ago, there was only $300 that was raised out of the $25,000 goal. We can check it right now because I didn't do it yet. Let's check it. And it's at $520 out of $25,000 goal. So it's not a lot of money because a lot of people have donated to the original reward fund. And you know what? It's only $520, and GoFundMe that takes a good deal of that money. So even if he was doing it for the wrong reasons, it's not the end of the world. It's not like he made $5,000 or $15,000 or $75,000. It's only $520. Although I will feel really bad for the people who donated to it if it was just a money grab. And I hate to sound so like bitter or skeptic, but I can't help it. Again, I follow so many of these cases, and I can't tell you how many times family members will try to use the tragedy to gain from it, like the extended family, not the immediate family, who try to use the grief to get money from people. And I'm a natural skeptic person, but when it comes to GoFundMes, oh my gosh, as soon as I see a GoFundMe, I'm immediately like, and I can't help it because there's so many out there that are just fraudulent or people just looking to get free money. And then I look at this and I'm like, all right, she's missing. There is a reward fund. Why the hell would you start this after the fact? It makes me, feel uncomfortable. Now, I don't plan on donating to it, and I have that right, so there's nothing I'm going to do about it. I'm not going to report his GoFundMe. That's ridiculous. I'm just not going to give to it. If I was going to give, I would definitely give to the fund that is much, much higher, because even a criminal out there would be willing to go to the police anonymous to get that money, right? Because that's a lot of money. A lot of money. Some kids don't even get a $10,000 reward, let alone $100,000. So, anyways, it looks like I'm going to start a different video on Oakley. I apologize for that because this is an hour and 5 minutes already. I was not expecting it to go that long at all. But, I like to ramble, so it is what it is. And these things take a while to upload the longer they are, and I don't want to be up all night. So I'm going to stop here, I think. Let me think if there's anything I wanted to say. There was other charges that were added to Kayla. I don't really think they're anything of importance to discuss, to be honest. Basically, she's not going anywhere anytime soon. And, neither is Adam because he has no bond at all. And that's it. As of right now, there is no information that has led them to locating Harmony. I think that at this time, there's still many people who I would say could be possible suspects or persons of interest. And I know the police originally said that nobody has been ruled out. They have not made any other statement to the contrary, okay? So that includes Crystal, that includes her boyfriend, it includes Kayla, it includes Adam, it includes everybody associated with him. Everything's on the table at this point. And I know Crystal believes that her daughter is alive and that Adam possibly sold her, but my gut is still telling me that unfortunately Harmony is no longer with us. I just don't believe for a second that she's out there somewhere at this point until something possibly leads me to believe otherwise. But I'm just not seeing it, unfortunately. And I think we're going to have a bad ending here. That being said, it is absolutely possible that she could be out there. And so we still need to keep her face, her name out there. Someone out there has to know something. I don't believe for a second that if Adam and Kayla did something to her, that they're the only ones who know. I think there will be somebody else who knows. And if you do believe Kevin Montgomery's claims that Adam admitted to giving his 5-year-old daughter a black eye, he admitted that. If you believe that, then he most likely told somebody what he did to his daughter. If he did do something to his daughter, which is definitely looking like he did. Okay? I will be absolutely shocked if he didn't have any involvement in her disappearance. But it's still on the table that he doesn't know what happened to her. And I know many people don't believe this, but it is possible that he's not lying when he said that he gave Harmony to Crystal. I think he is, but it's possible he's not. So, we will do another update on Lina and Harmony in a few days. Let it progress. I know they're going to be doing more searches for Lina on Saturday. And I know that law enforcement is busy at work in New Hampshire searching for harmony. And let's just hope and pray that these two little girls are found one way or another to bring the cases to conclusions and to give the families some answers. And until next time, which will be in a few minutes, I will see you soon to discuss Oakley Carlson. Please don't be upset with me if I came across a bit, blunt or angry while discussing the story. But again, it's a very triggering story. It's very upsetting. It's involving really important topics, and it's involving a lot of small children. And we should all be in agreement that any crimes or abuse or neglect or anything of the sort involving any child is not okay. It's not okay. They're innocent children who didn't ask to be born, who didn't ask for the lifestyles they were living, who couldn't change their circumstances. They couldn't just move out. They couldn't just go get a job and get their own place. They were relying on a lot of people to keep them safe. And every child in this story has been affected. And so it gets me really angry, and I become passionate, and it may come across as being very aggressive, but it's just the passion of anger, the passion of wanting these things to change, for crimes against children to stop, for people to take responsibility for their own actions. And I won't apologize for that. So please understand where I'm coming from. Harmony was 5. She should not be missing for 2 freaking years. It shouldn't have happened. Lina, she's a toddler. A toddler. And she's missing. Like, poof. Nobody knows where the hell she went. It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And their stories matter. And that's why I'm telling them to you. Because even if all 3 end up resulting in a confirmation of death, their lives mattered, and they need to be told. Their stories need to be told. The more we discuss it, the more awareness that's out there, the more we can make some changes and try our best to prevent it from happening to another child. Every story has a lesson. You just gotta find what that lesson is and how to apply it to not only your life, but the people around you, the people you work with, the people you see in the grocery store, your neighbor, and more, so that it doesn't happen again and again. Now, are we going to end all children going missing ever? No, but certain stories, like Harmony's, could be used for good. You can make positive changes to certain systems in place and prevent it from happening to another little girl in New Hampshire. So, now on that note, until next time, I'll see you soon.